because like the new set came in today. So, it's no big deal. They'll rotate, when the next Best Picture is crowned in 6 years. They'll shift. Of course, I keep joking that the next Best Picture winner is going to have like a fucking red poster and totally throw off the like turquoise color palette we got going on here. But, whatever. So let's talk about the first real Oscar contender of the year. In my eyes, unless you want to argue something like The King of Staten Island has a chance, which I personally don't really see happening. But let's talk about Spike Lee's The Five Bloods. More often than not, there is one summer release that tends to do really well at the Academy Awards. There's one like central summer release. Last year you had Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. The year before you had Dunkirk. And I think if I'm correct, and if the Academy season goes in the way that it is planning on, I guess, at the moment, this is probably going to be the film to look for in terms of what's going to do the best when it comes to the Academy Awards regarding summer releases. It's also the next in a series that proves many of the grade A filmmakers of many decades, spanning over many years, are willing to make feature films for Netflix. Following Martin Scorsese creating The Irishman last year, we now have a Spike Lee joint coming to be a Netflix original, which is a really big deal. It was screening at Cannes, and if I'm not mistaken, it's the first Netflix film to be chosen for Cannes. It's not going to be screened, but it was in the official jury selection. So it's a really big deal, this film, and it's important to talk about it. The reviews were pretty stellar, so I was really excited to sit down and watch it. And it is one of those films that I just finished viewing, and I think I'm going to be better talking about it immediately following the viewing. I really like this movie. I really, really like this movie. I wish I'd been able to see it in the theater. I think my experience would have been enhanced tenfold, but this is a really, really strong film. I guess in terms of putting it with his other work, I don't love it as much as something like BlacKkKlansman, but it's definitely up there. And there's a lot to really admire about this film, and it is crazy to think that it released right now amidst everything going on in the world. On a filmmaking level, right, you have Spike Lee kind of doing what Spike Lee does best, and it's very much a Spike Lee joint. Like, BlacKkKlansman, I personally feel there are times where you can forget that it's a Spike Lee movie. Like, I don't want to say it feels by the books, but there's less of, like, what he's known for in it. In this, you have a lot of the way that he directs, and a lot of what gives him the stamp of a Spike Lee joint in this movie. The editing techniques in particular that are used feel very much like Spike Lee. Some of the wipes, some of the transitions, the aspect ratio changes, the instant replay that you have going on. It feels like a very personal film to him, which is really cool, despite tonally it being a little bit different from other things that you'd see. I'm used to seeing Spike Lee films that are very centric in smaller locations, almost smaller locales, right? You've got BlacKkKlansman, which takes place in sort of a town, or Inside Man, which takes place essentially in and outside of a bank. Do the Right Thing, which is like a small neighborhood. And then this film is exceptionally vast, right? They go to Vietnam, and they go in all different sorts of landscapes. They go from big cities to the forest and the jungle, and the jungle, and like it's crazy how the balance is between feeling like, whoa, Spike Lee made this, and yeah, Spike Lee made this. And that was really kind of something I appreciated about this film. It, to a certain degree, felt like a step outside of his comfort zone, while also doing what he does best, which I think is a really stunning achievement for a filmmaker who is so seasoned and is so known for doing specific things. And when it comes to those specific things that he's known for doing, such as touching on modern themes and problems in the world, with a film like this, and I've often been a sayer of, if you're going to touch on modern issues, political issues, racism, all that jazz, there has to be a level of nuance to it, right? And on the surface of this, almost seems like there isn't. It's very upfront, and it's very in your face about what's going on, but by that same token, there's a lot that's working in my eyes, that's layered. And for me, I found that in the character work of this film. All 5 primary characters are extremely diverse. They're very versatile, yet they all have their own, culminating factor that brings them together, while simultaneously having their individual personalities and their individual traits that kind of each touch on an issue that we're facing currently, because Spike Lee does not touch on one problem here. He's not just talking about fundamental racism. He's talking about political racism and kind of the way that the current presidency is rubbing off on certain people and how it's affecting the mindset of certain people. You have general comments and themes regarding PTSD and soldiers from the Vietnam War and racism outside of just white to black. You also have racism against the Vietnamese and racism from the Vietnamese against the African Americans. There's a lot at play here, and there are a lot of sequences that display a lot of different things. And yes, they seem surface level. Not in the idea that they're portrayed surface level, but they're just kind of given to you, right? But the thing about them is, Spike Lee is such a good director, the characters are so well written, and the acting is so fucking good that it all seems very purposeful, right? There's a level of nuance that's there that you recognize, while simultaneously you're just kind of seeing it unfold in front of you. That's a very difficult thing to achieve, and also a very difficult thing to explain, if that hasn't been made clear. But it's something that I find to be the highlight of this film, and something that I appreciate the film most for doing, because to touch on such a wide array in the fashion that it is touched on is truly, truly impressive to me. And on that standard, the character work I think is really, really great. Delroy Lindo is fucking phenomenal. He's kind of talk of the town right now. He's the one that everyone is talking about buzz for. It'll be interesting to see whether they campaign him in lead or supporting, but I think he's exceptional in this film, and I think he's going to do a really, really fucking good job when it comes to award season. Jonathan Majors, I know, he does a really great job. Clark Peters, I love, he's great. Norm Lewis, I think, is the one character that, in my eyes, was weaker. They kind of drop all of his character development, even, like, arc, backstory in one scene, and it was a little bit rushed, in my opinion. He was kind of on the back end of things. And then Isaiah Whitlock, I really, really liked as well. He's always great in Spike Lee films. And his character is well defined, though not being like super duper fleshed out. I think he's very well defined, and I really liked the ending of his arc. I like the ending of all these characters' arcs, actually. The only one that I think was a little underdone was Eddie, which kind of plays into the fact that, to a certain degree, this movie's predictable. In a sense, in certain regards, the movie's predictable. You could guess a lot of things that are going to happen in this film, but the way that they're executed is still really spectacular and makes them feel earned. Like, yeah, the story goes in a general direction that you might anticipate it to go, but it gets there in a way that keeps you interested, keeps you enthralled, and does, in a sense, keep you guessing, right? Keep you going, well, you know what, maybe that's not going to happen. It kind of has these red herring scenes where you think something's going to happen, and then it doesn't, but then happens later, and kind of gives you the middle finger of being like, yeah, you thought it was going to happen there, but we're actually going to do it here, which I appreciate, and I thought was pretty cool. The way that the film is shot and the overall direction is really strong. It's a genuinely intense film. It's really visceral, and it's really gripping, and it's a lot darker than I had anticipated it to be. And it gets you. I mean, it hooks you in, and when you are hooked in, you're following this journey from start to finish, because it's a 2.5 hour long film, and I'll get a little bit more into that when I get into the little things, I guess, that I didn't like. But, you know, as a whole, like, the practical effects are really great, and the pacing is really strong, which I found to be a factor that was impressive to me. I guess I didn't expect a lot of elements that where this film went. Like, I didn't expect there to be shootouts in this movie, and they're really good. Like, they're really, really well done, and they compare, like, an old Vietnam shootout and the way that that's shot to, like, the way that they shoot a shootout in modern day setting, and it's really cool to look at the way that the two are edited and shot and how different it is. All around, I found that really cool. But, like, it's a harsh film, and it's difficult to watch in certain areas, but all of that stuff is so well executed, and there's so much detail put into it that I found myself so impressed. And I don't know why I was so impressed, because we don't expect anything less out of Spike Lee. But this film genuinely still managed to wow me in a lot of areas that I didn't expect it to. I guess in terms of gripes and things that I don't like as much with this movie, as I said, I think the character of Eddie is underdone, and his ending off is a little eh. In my opinion, there are 4 writers on this film. However many of you have looked up the IMDb of those writers, there are points in this movie where I think you can see a divide between those 4, 2 and 2. Specifically for me in like the first 25-ish minutes, 20 to 25 minutes. There are parts of the script that are not nearly as good as the rest, in terms of dialogue to me. Some of it feels a little forced and a little over the top. There are also elements in those first 20 to 25 minutes where I thought it was a little choppy in the way that it was moving. And once those 25 minutes are up, it really finds its footing, and it starts to flow really, really nicely. And it really does flow well. But those first 20 minutes feel very odd to me. They had a weird feeling to them, and maybe I need to watch them again, and I'll respect them and appreciate them more. But it was a little choppy, and I thought the script was a little weaker towards the beginning. But once the whole kind of actual plot kicks in, it's gripping, it's humane, it's down to earth, and it's intense. There's a lot of different tonal elements of this film. It can be funny, and it can be serious, and it can be dramatic, and it can be violent, and it can be brutal. And it has to be all of those things to try to portray what it's trying to do. You know, it's in essence an adventure film that's also a character study for a group of people and for individual people. Regarding Oscar chances for this, I totally think this is something you'll see in Best Picture. Spike Lee in director would be interesting. I won't say for sure putting him in director. We'll have to see, I guess, what he's up against. I could totally see this in screenplay. Definitely lead or supporting actor, depending on where they put... I forgot his name again. Depending on where they put Delroy Lindo. My apology, I've never seen him before. He's really spectacular, and I won't, get too ahead of myself and say he has a chance to win, but I wouldn't be completely and utterly shocked if he winds up picking up the Oscar. I'm sure you can expect to see it in editing, probably cinematography, a lot of technical categories. I'd like to see what they decide to campaign and where. I'm sure they'll do a whole slew of campaigning for it. Overall, though, if you're a Spike Lee fan, see this film. If you are somebody who's actively involved and listening to what's going on in the world right now, which should be everybody, watch this film. You all have the Netflix subscription. I know you do. You gotta watch this thing. There's a lot of imagery. There's a lot of writing that is truly important to our society and what's happening right now. And usually I don't discuss a lot of politics when it comes to films, but it's necessary with this one. It's often necessary with Spike Lee films. It handles it really well with the right amount of delicacy, but also the right amount of lack of nuance, I want to say. For instance, a character wears a Make America Great Again hat for the entire film, and it's used as a plot device in several different occasions. That might seem over the top to you, but the way by which it's used and the reasons for which it's used work. And it's executed really well. I guess if I had to take one example of something in the film that represents what I was talking about earlier, it would be that. It would be that hat and the way that it's used and conveyed, despite seeming a little over the top. Anyway, I would give this film a strong 8 out of 10. I highly, highly, highly recommend that you watch it, especially if you're looking for early Oscar contenders. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of the movie in the comments below. I'm super excited to hear your thoughts, and I'll see you all next time.